In addition, she has run her own production company. She is a senior producer at the moment with Los Angeles Times Studios and is focusing on creating and developing digital content for them. She's also a frequent guest lecturer at USC Annenberg School for Communication and Journalism, as well as a mentor at the Daniel Pearl Journalism Magnet School in Los Angeles. Thus, all told, you will probably not be surprised to know that in 2019, the Los Angeles Press Club named her Journalist of the Year. We're honored that she's taken time to be with us and to introduce us to her craft so that we understand better how to provide what journalists need from us. And Karen, it's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you for that kind introduction. And oh, thank you. And it's really a pleasure to be here. Thank you. Kristen and Christina have been working so hard on this. So I'm sorry we're not together here in Orange County, but this is, I think we're all used to Zoom world now. So it's really an honor to be here. I will tell you, I'm a product of Jesuit education. I graduated from Loyola Marymount. I still live about a mile from Loyola Marymount. So this is near and dear to my heart. And any chance I can get Loyola Marymount professors on the news, I do it. So anyway, it's really a pleasure. I hope everyone's having a good new year. I wanted to just kind of ask, I like to know who the audience is. Just a show of hands, it can be a physical hand or your emoji hand. Has anyone here been on television or interviewed for radio or print? I'm just wondering what experience, if you haven't, that's okay. Okay, Grace has, Kate, oh, quite a few of you. Okay, great. And how was that experience? Pretty good or a little scary? Quite a few. Okay, I understand. I have been on the other side of this. I have been mostly a journalist, but I've also been interviewed. So I can speak from both sides of the microphone. So anyway, why don't we get started? I'm going to share my screen and this should do it. Why is it not sharing? Do it. There we go. There we go. Great. Hold on just a second. Okay, great. Hopefully everybody's seeing that. And if there's any problems, let me know. So just an introduction, you've heard a little bit about me and I have spent about 20 years, maybe a little bit more doing this. I just want to clarify, I'm not a reporter for the LA Times. You're not going to see a byline from me in the LA Times. Just briefly, a lot of people ask me, what is the LA Times Studios? What is that? Actually, many newspapers, New York Times, Boston Globe have a division similar to what we have. And my job, we create original programming. We do branded content, we do advertising, we do third-party productions. And this is a move I think your newspapers are going to, because if they just stay a newspaper, I think they're going to have a short shelf life. That's just the reality. And so I'm part of this new division. And just briefly, I just recently created a series called Hear Me Out, in which we profile letters to the editor. So we tell the stories behind the letters to the editor. And it's actually, I'm being interviewed about that next week. So again, we can talk about how to do interviews. That's something I do have some experience with. So let's get started. How can you interact with the media to get attention for your work? That's what we're hoping to do today. So I'll give you some tips. We'll walk through it. Please, if you have any questions along the way, unmute yourself and just ask. I'd love for this to be a conversation. And I really want to know what you think, what your experiences have been. So I'm going to go through this. We're going to talk about getting the call from a reporter. What happens? You get the call. Do you take it? Do you don't? That call is actually very important. At least it is for me. Then we're going to talk about nailing the interview. You know, how do you execute? How do you get your message across? Then we're going to talk about personal style. Most of this PowerPoint is going to be directed towards audio and video. Frankly, a print producer, a print reporter doesn't care what your background looks like. They don't care about your lighting. So I wanted to, that's more my background. And so that's what we're going to be focusing on is audio and video. Then we'll talk about frequently asked questions. Some of the questions I've heard over the years, maybe you'll have your own too. We'll go through that. Then we're going to talk about how to get your message across social media. We're going to talk about TikTok videos, We're going to show some examples. And then if we have time, we're going to do some mock interviews. I know Kristen has volunteered, but maybe there's somebody else here who would like to go through a quick interview. I promise it will be painless. So first thing I want to talk about is getting the call. Obviously, most of you have gotten a call from a journalist, somebody like me saying, Christopher, I'm calling you because I read a paper you did, you have a dissertation, or I just recently saw a speech you did, and I'm really interested. The question you should ask yourself is, do you want to participate? Is this even something that you're interested in? It may depend on the medium. Is it audio? Is it video? I often come across people who are a little nervous about being on camera. I totally get it. So think about that. But take the call, because for one thing, you've now made a contact with me, right? Or whoever is reaching out to you. That might be valuable down the line. And it's also valuable to me if I find that, Kristen takes my call and we have an initial conversation and it goes well. I'm going to put her down in my phone, in my contact list. The other reason why is maybe this is not something you want to comment in, but maybe you have a colleague, right, who's an expert. And so you're passing me on to somebody else who is probably, well-versed in this. Now I've made that contact, but it also helps you. Now I know, wow, I can go to, Andrea, and he's going to be able to tell me, he's a good source. So consider the call. If you don't have time for it, that's okay, but always offer maybe to reschedule, but it's really up to you. But give it some thought, but always do take the call. So now you have the call. It is important that you ask some questions, obviously. And some of the questions that I think I'm often asked is how much reporting have you done? Am I your first phone call that you're making? I'm their first contact. Then what are you actually reporting on? There's a chance that I have the story wrong. If I do have it, please tell me. But it's important that you, as the expert, as the academic, ask me, what's the scope? I often get asked this, and it sometimes troubles me. I'm asked a lot, what's your angle? I try not to go into a story with a predetermined angle. I'm not out to get somebody or something, but I may have a hypothesis, right? For example, I think that if we were to look at traffic stop data here in LA, I think that we would find that Black and brown communities are stopped more than white drivers. I just have this feeling. So I call UCLA and I'm talking to the professor. He may say, you've got it all wrong, Karen. That's not the place to be looking. You should be looking over here. And that actually often happens. I can't tell you how many times I go in and I'm talking to an expert like any of you, and they say, well, you got the story wrong. That's not the angle you should be looking at. You really should be looking at that. But please ask us those questions. Ask us, how much reporting have you done? Have you looked at this research paper? Have you done this? Hopefully a journalist has, but it depends. Maybe you're their first call. So please ask questions. We want you to ask questions. This is important. What is this for? Is it for the local news? Is it WABC and we're turning it around really fast, or is this for a long form documentary? Those are questions you want to ask, because that'll determine how much time this takes. And is it for print? So remember, if it's television, I'm going to have different needs from you. So we'll talk about that in a second. This one I get a lot. Who else have you spoken with? There's often academics who say, this has occasionally happened, but I don't want to be in the same story with so-and-so. Especially in print, they may be concerned about how closely they're associated with another voice. So I do get asked that, whoever you're speaking with, and I'm usually very happy to share that. There's no reason why. And often it can be validating. They may say, oh, good, you're talking to, Dr. Jones, she's the very best in this business. And that's really who you should talk to. It's also good for me as a journalist, if you have a problem with somebody else, I'm going to ask, why does Kate not want to talk to Kristen? Is there something there? I would like to know. But I am off. That's probably the question I get asked quite a bit, is who have you spoken with? So that initial call, those are all the questions You certainly should ask, feel free to, and you probably will even have your own. So yeah, so take the call seriously. This is your test. And this is very true. When I call initially, I'm checking to see, do you, how do you speak? Are you conversational? I really want to find out, do you know this topic well? Do you have any information that might benefit me, that adds to the story? We all have the same goal, right? Which is we're on the side of truth. We want to illuminate the public on a particular topic. And so I really am valuing that first conversation and seeing how it goes. So if you can't take the call, just say, you know what, call me back in an hour. I really want to speak to you about this, about whatever the topic is, climate change or coastal erosion. But now's not a good time. Let's schedule some time where we really can get into it. So please take that call seriously, because most reporters are going to judge you on that call. I just talked about this. Does the reporter have the story wrong? Please tell me if I'm looking, if I'm going in a wrong direction, or I have misunderstood the topic. Keep us honest. This is really important. And this does occasionally happen. We just talked about that, but often academics will say, well, here's something else that you might want to consider. I know you're looking into the police traffic data, but you really should also be looking at sentencing records or something like that. But don't be afraid, and please do us that favor and tell us when we're getting it wrong. So you might want to ask, I know some of you have already been interviewed. I'm curious to know if it was for print, which is probably the standard. But I have done audio, I have done video. Video hands down takes a lot more work, because I have to come to your office and we have to film, and we have to set it up. So ask what this is for, and understand that there are different needs. Audio, often we can just do it right there, and we're going to talk later about how to record on your end using your iPhone. But do ask that, because there are different needs, and you may not have time. You may not want me in your house. We're encountering that obviously in the last year. So we have to make accommodations for that. So just ask, because that'll determine, I think, how much time you want to devote to this. Okay, now we get to it, being interviewed. You've agreed to the interview. You feel pretty comfortable about this. And now it's time. And it really depends if you're doing this for local news. They're going to do this in 5 minutes. The show that I used to work on SoCal Connected, it was long form. So we did half-hour to hour shows. So our interviews tend to go quite a bit longer. By the way, this photo is from an interview I just did 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I think we were at this woman's house for about 2.5 hours. The video is only going to be 3 minutes, but we spent about 2.5 hours with her. That includes B-roll, the interview, and all kinds of things. So keep that in mind, and please ask, is this for the local news? Is this for a Vox video? Is this for Frontline? That will determine, I think, how much time it's going to take. But always, I will tell you, in production, it always takes longer than usual. So it always seems to. Are there any questions so far, as before? Yeah.
Can you say something about the interviews that happen on Zoom? Because this is been happening recently. So not, as you indicated now, in the house, at home, yes, but through Zoom.
Yeah, and we're going to get to that. We're going to get to Zoom interviews. But yes, that is true. And I, at the LA Times, and we're going to see some samples coming up, I'm a senior producer on a medical show. It's called Second Opinion. We're kind of in hiatus right now, but all of our interviews, Andrea, we're on Zoom. And what we would have to do is we would do what's called a check-in. And perhaps some of you have had this already. So what we would do is have our technical director contact you. And I mean, by the way, you have a great setup with beautiful lighting. Love the bookshelf in the background. And so what we want to do is we want to test make sure the look is right. We're going to get to that a little bit later, but that's what we'll do. And we also want to make sure that your bandwidth is strong enough, that we're not going to have internet problems where your signal's dropping in and out. That has been something that we occasionally have. And so that's why we'll tend to do a check-in about 15 to 20 minutes ahead of time, because we are a live show. So if your shot goes down, we've got big problems. And it does happen. So that's the thing, but we're going to talk about how you can present yourself on Zoom, right? Because you're now suddenly the photographer. So I have to say things are lightening up and opening a little bit more now here, certainly in LA. We are doing more interviews in person. But yes, for a full year, we have done nothing but Zoom interviews for our medical show. And sometimes it's a challenge because we're literally having people rearrange their furniture sometimes to get a nice background. So we're going to get to that in a second. Okay. We're going to do 10 tips. And I think some of you already know these, but it's worth going over. Know your stuff, of course. If I call you and you're not really comfortable with the topic, it's fine to decline the interview, but I would appreciate it if if you really don't know the topic and you're not comfortable with it, just say so. And so we want you to know your stuff, know it pretty well, hopefully. And so that kind of, I think, goes without saying, but you'd be surprised. I had once, I tend to fact check the interviews because this has happened to me, and I've probably done maybe 1,000 interviews in my time. Literally, I've done so many. I once talked to a lawyer. It was for a case involving UCLA. At the time, they had a huge bacterial infection that was going through the hospital and had actually, I think, killed 2 people. So we interviewed a lawyer who was representing one of the plaintiffs who was suing. And he said a fact in the story, about the case, and I thought nothing of it. I went back and I thought, I'm not sure that that's accurate. But I thought, well, he's the lawyer, he would know, right? But people make mistakes. And so sure enough, it turns out he had a fact wrong in the case that I caught. And so I really do try to fact check. I may even ask you, Christopher, hey, do you have any facts to back that up? You're saying, LA's air quality, is whatever, making a statement. I'm going to probably ask you, do you have any papers or a study to back that up? Only because simply people make mistakes. It's not that they don't know what they're talking about. I've just had that happen a few times. So just make sure you know your stuff. Don't be offended if the reporter asks, for some sort of backup on that. So this is a good one. Consider your answers beforehand. We've had the initial call. You know what I'm going to be probably asking you often in that first call. I'm asking you the questions that I'm probably going to ask in the interview. Reporters generally do not submit questions in advance. I never do that. But that first call, I'm testing the waters. I want to find out, can you speak to the border crisis? How much do you know? These are probably going to be the questions we're going to ask in the interview. So practice. And I've done this when I've been interviewed. Often I'll do it when I'm walking my dog. I'll do it on the way to the station. I like to say things out loud, but I anticipate what the questions are going to be. And I have an answer already ready-made. So work on your quote. Please try, if you can, keep them short. You're much more likely to make the piece if they're short, quick sentences. Maybe there's some sort of quote that you throw around often about your work. Use it, but anticipate what those questions are and have your answers, have them ready. Sometimes I have some people who write notes down on a note card and they put them down. That's fine. Usually in an interview, I'll have them put them down though, because if I'm sitting here and talking to you and I've got this piece of paper, I'm looking at the paper, I'm not paying attention to the questions, right? So I have them put it down. They also make a lot of noise. So anticipate the questions or the answers. Think about what your answer is going to be. I want to show an example from Fordham University. I just thought this was a really good interview. She definitely knows her stuff, definitely has her answers down. So let's take a look.
Here. Want to continue talking about the fallout and what's next in New York politics. So joining us now is Professor Monica McDermott. She is a political science professor at Fordham University. To start things out here tonight, we thank you for joining us. What do we know about Kathy Hochul and the kind of governor she will be beyond what we just saw there?
We don't know a lot about her in terms of what she would do as an executive. So she served in Congress, as you said, and that gives her a lot of political experience. And she's been lieutenant governor, but it's not a really powerful position in New York State. And so what remains to be seen is how she handles taking the reins of a state the size of New York. And there aren't a lot of women out there for us to go by in terms of governorships, because women don't typically win that position, in part because it's an executive position. So I think there's a bit of unknown here.
And we're going to hear from her. This came down late tonight, 11 a.m. tomorrow. So we'll be watching that too. So another big question here, how likely is it that Governor Cuomo would try to run for governor again? Does he still have support? What do you think?
We're hoping at this point he realizes that would be a very big mistake. Although he's been seen to be tone deaf sometimes, today he actually stepped down, which was a bit of a surprise because it seemed as though he was going to fight that tooth and nail. But I don't see him trying to revive his career, or if he does, I don't see him getting another chance from the public.
And I'm, we have.
So I thought that was a really good interview for a couple of reasons. And I don't know Monica. I wonder if she's popular on some of the shows out there. I would certainly book her. A couple of things that I liked. Definitely knows her stuff. I don't know much about New York politics other than the scandal involving Cuomo, but I learned from her, wow, women are not in executive positions. Kathy's unknown. So she definitely knows the lay of the land. I also thought she brought in a sense of humor. She seemed really conversational. I would want to learn more. I would want to have a conversation and talk with her. So did everybody else, any thoughts on that interview? And again, you may know Monica. She's a Fordham University professor. Any questions or comments? Okay.
She didn't say, she didn't, just like one or two, she was looking directly at the camera.
Exactly. And she seemed like she was just talking to me, and that's a sign of a great interview. I feel like she's talking just to me, and she didn't look like a deer in the headlights. We'll get to how your interview looks, but boy, I can tell she's right in front of a north-facing window. Huge props for that, because she's a real natural lighting. I don't think she has like a artificial light. Really lovely room too. Very articulate. I think anytime you can use a sense of humor, use it. So any other thoughts or comments? Okay, I can't feel.
But it was okay or good that she kind of said that she didn't really know what the new governor was going to do, rather than speculating. I thought that was a good choice.
Exactly, and I also, yes, I agree 100%. Okay, so we're going to go to the next. Oh, here we go. This is really important. I hope, yes, and let's spend a little bit of time on this one. Don't assume anything is off the record. So when a journalist calls you and has that initial call, assume the minute that they pick up the phone and you're talking, it's on the record. The game is on, okay? And so it really depends on the journalist, and I think it depends on the news organization, but you should always assume that. And then I'll tell you what my policy is. So assume that everything you're saying is on the record. Try not to go off the record. If you do, you have to make that very clear, and you have to negotiate that with the reporter. So what do? I've had a couple experiences where I picked up the phone, I'm talking to Christopher, and then he's told me, his thoughts on this, and he said, "Right, you got to look at this record." And then about 20 minutes, 15 minutes in, they go, "Well, this is off the record, right? You're not quoting me. I don't want to be involved in your story." And then we have to go, uh-oh, we have a problem, because no, it is on the record. And so I had a couple incidents where that happened, and generally people didn't understand the rules, and there was a freak out moment because they're worried they're going to get fired, or they think I'm going to throw their name onto NPR right away. So my policy is, whenever I call somebody, I immediately tell them, this is on the record, this is off the record, this is backgrounds. I'm setting the rules right away, because I don't think everybody understands them, right? And so that's what I do. I recommend that you, if the reporter doesn't make that clear, ask them. Just simply say, is this on the record? Is this off the record? Is this on background? Now, you may wonder, what's the difference between all of these things? Well, on the record means everything you're telling me, I can use in my story, and I'm going to attribute it to you. I can. So off the record means, and again, this depends on the news organization. My interpretation means I'm telling you something you cannot use and you cannot attribute it to me. So I'm telling you that the mayor was arrested for domestic violence. There were records at the police department, but you didn't hear this from me, and you can't use that. You can't use that. That's what off the record is to me. On background, it's more in that same example. The mayor was arrested for domestic violence. The LAPD has the records, but you didn't hear this from me. Okay, so I can go use that. I'm going to go find that record at the LAPD, but I'm not going to say Christopher told me. Christopher, I keep using an example because your name's up. So, so that's the difference. And again, every organization may treat these things differently. So please ask, when in doubt, ask the reporter. You know, so that's really important, because you don't want to get down the road, right, of a conversation you're half hour in or an hour in, and then you realize, oh, they're recording this, they're writing this down. And a note on recording, in California, we're a two-party consent state. So I cannot record our conversation without your consent. Other states are different. I don't know what the rule is in New York or Massachusetts. When I was with Dateline NBC years ago, we did all of our undercover work in Arizona because it's one party. So I can record anybody I want surreptitiously there, and I do not need their permission. Not true in California. So that's another thing you want to ask if you're concerned. Are you recording this? And know what the rules are of your state. So this is a big one. I probably bring this up. Oh, yes, Emily.
I'm sorry, I think this is a pretty quick question, but when you were talking about the difference between on the record and background, if you are speaking with someone and you know that it's on the record, just to clarify, that still doesn't mean that the person being interviewed will be able to see the quotes before it goes, before it's published, right?
Yep.
That often has to be negotiated. So when you agree to speak with someone on the record, that takes a lot of trust.
It does.
And so I think that's part of why you started by inviting us to ask questions so that we can get to know the angle and get to know the person and what they're coming from. I feel like I've been burned by that before and am a little more careful about that now. But it just means I think that there's a big gap between being on the record and speaking on background. Like a lot of things can happen in the sort of middle space there.
You're absolutely right. And that's why I think it's really important to determine what the ground rules are. You know, I'm calling you and you know, I just don't think it's necessarily fair that we journalists should assume everybody we call knows what the rules are, you know, and the LA Times rules may be different than NPR's rules. And so for me, I always make that clear. And so I generally, you know, some people may criticize me, but I generally go in on background. Because I find that people are much more comfortable talking to me if I say, look, none of this is quoted. Emily, we're going to just talk. We're going to talk about, you know, Facebook and their privacy concerns, because you're the expert. We're going to just talk on background. And then you get to know me. And there's a comfort level there and then hopefully you get to trust me. And if not, if you think, I want nothing to do with this person, then you can let the call go. But that's why I tend to talk off background initially. I just think that people are more comfortable with it. But I think soliciting information around the context of the interview is really important. And you should. I'm sorry you've been burned about that. Maybe we'll hear a little bit more about that situation. But that is one of the list of the questions we often get asked. Can I see the questions? Can I see the story beforehand? And the answer is no. No. But we'll get to that. Anybody else have questions about this? Because this is an important section on and off the record.
I was just going to add kind of not so much about on the record, but in terms of language. Because in the work I do, language regarding individuals with disabilities is really important because a lot of times in public speak or even in media, it will be sentimental language or just not appropriate. And so wanting to be really clear, because sometimes those words have been even like attributed to me when I was very intentional about not. So that has been sometimes where I've had to be very clear, and sometimes it's worked and sometimes not.
That's important, and that might be where you want to follow up with an email. I assume you did, but if not, write to the reporter and say, I want to make sure that we're using the proper terms, or that I'm being very clear about what I'm saying here. And that's yes, and say it in the interview too, Anne.
Oh, I did actually. In this one situation, the reporter did a great. There have been a few times where I've been burnt, but this one I'm thinking of, the reporter did a great job, but then I'm assuming it was the editor. So not saying, we're talking about adults and employment opportunities and with disabilities, and the editor put, children with special needs, jobs for children with special needs, which was like totally the wrong language to use. And it was the title of the article, and I'm sure it was the editor that did it after the fact. So,
and they probably just didn't simply know. Well, I hope you followed up. I'm sure you did. That's important because reporters generally come from a good place, but sometimes they make mistakes. And please let them know. Let me know if I'm getting it wrong. Generally, it's coming. There's no ill intent here. They just simply don't know. But that's important. I'm sorry to hear that. So. This is a really important one. I say this almost every interview. Again, more on the audio and video side. I don't think print reporters care so much about this, but try to incorporate the question into your answer. And I'm going to give you an example. And again, this is not going to pertain to if I have Anne, on our Second Opinion show, which is a live to tape show. This doesn't really apply. If you're on live with Anderson Cooper, it's not going to apply. It's going to apply though in the work that I do right now, where they're not going to hear me asking a question, right? And so try to incorporate the question and answer. And I usually have to ask people a couple times and then they get the hang of it. I'm going to give you an example. Are the COVID-19 boosters effective against the current variants? A good answer, and again, I don't mean to project my thoughts on you, but here's a good example. There's no doubt today's boosters are effective against the variants. So you see how the question was incorporated into the answer. What's not so great is if you were to answer, no doubt they are. Like I said, there's a lot of data that show they work. For one thing, no doubt they are. What's the they? If they never hear my question, this answer doesn't really work. And please stay away from references like I said, again, remember when I told you, because when we go to edit the story, we may not have heard it the first time you said it. And when I'm interviewing people, I'm hearing the sound bites as I'm talking to you, Anne. I'm hearing them in my head, and I'm already thinking, oh, that was a good one. Oh, she said that so well. Ooh, I'm going to use that. And so we're good producers, journalists are already thinking which bites are the best. So the more that you can try to remember to incorporate the question into the answer, it really helps. Now, as I always tell people, if you get thrown off by this, forget it. My job is to make the story come together well. So if you get hooked on this, don't worry, but it really is a good tip. And it really helps, especially in audio and video interviews. Okay, any questions about that? Okay, great, we'll move on. So practice that one, it's really quite helpful. Couple tips, here's sort of 4, and I call it amen. Your audience, know who your audience is. Are you speaking to a national audience? Are you speaking to a very specific audience? Are you talking to the scientific community? Are you talking to the American Ophthalmology Association, where they're going to know these insider terms? Are you talking to a younger audience? Knowing that I think would really help. For example, I keep coming back to our science show. A Second Opinion was a very intense science show. So we had scientists that would speak and insider terms, and well, it was watched by many scientists, so it sort of worked. But the average person is not going to know the difference between T cells and antibodies and all of these things. So know your audience, right? Message. You know, if there's 2 or 3 things that you want to get across, you've done this great study, and there's 2 or 3 things that you think are really important that you really want to hit hard, do it, and do it early in the interview. Again, let the reporter know, say, you know what, I found out, you know, that, again, coming back to the traffic data, you know, I found out that people in certain zip codes in LA, they're 5 times more likely to get pulled over. Let the reporter know that, and we'll make sure we get that message out. Examples. This is so helpful. If you can give me examples, it really helps, because it helps the audience understand what you're talking about. We love examples, and we're going to see a sample of that in a moment. Negatives. Look, if you know that you know, I'm making this up, but you're the subject of a sexual harassment lawsuit, and you know, I'm going to come and ask you about it, maybe be prepared. Think, well, what are the negatives? What are the questions that might maybe not be so friendly? And so keep that in mind. So, because sometimes those do happen, as we know. My background, by the way, is more as an investigative reporter. That's what I spent a good deal doing. But I'm not sort of approaching this session today as how to address an investigative reporter, because I think there's a much more friendlier audience. So great. Here's an example. Maybe you know Erica Lee. She's a professor at a university in Minnesota. We recently had her a few months ago on Second Opinion. This was actually, I believe, for our July 4th show. We were looking at racism and xenophobia in America. But keep this in mind. She gives an example, and she incorporates the host's question right off the bat. So let's just take a look for a second, okay?
Erica, historically, fears of disease, poor hygiene, poor sanitation have been used to target immigrant communities. Tell us about that history.
It's a long history, Sue. It really goes back to every single immigrant group that had already been identified as a threat, either because they were too foreign, or because there were too many, or concerns that they were taking away jobs, etc. So we see even in the 18th century that Germans are being blamed for bringing yellow fever. We know that Irish immigrants, Jewish immigrants, Italian immigrants were blamed for bringing and spreading diseases like cholera and typhoid, and that Chinese immigrants were blamed for bringing bubonic plague. That these groups were then disproportionately targeted and impacted by both public health policies that were implemented in the name of protecting the greater American public health, as well as immigration policies that used the fear of disease and contagion to restrict immigration. And that's what we've seen with the Trump administration. It's not just—
So we're going to keep, okay, it goes on for another minute, but I thought she was very good. One thing, she referenced Sewell's, question a little bit at the beginning, and then she gave us some great examples, right? And so, and articulate to the point. I thought she was a very good interviewer. We were really pleased with her. Any questions or comments? I'm curious what you all think about that. And look, if you disagree with me, that's okay. Any questions or thoughts? Okay. All right, great. So we're going to keep going. Couple more tips. Avoid the jargon. We talked about this. Chances are, if you're speaking to a general audience, they're not steeped in the topic that you are. I mean, so keep it simple. What we often say, and you'll hear reporters, especially for radio and broadcast, I often have to say, talk to me like I'm a 5th grader. And I really mean it. Talk to me that I am, don't use big words, don't use insider terms. Please talk as if you were talking to your middle schooler, or your grandma, or your neighbor, or the guy on the soccer field. If you can communicate a complex issue in those simple terms, in conversational terms, perfect, that's great. But we do sometimes have that where people get too caught up in the insert terms, and I've had to sometimes stop interviews and say, and I literally have said this a couple of times, I don't know what you're talking about. No, I do, but I'm speaking really behalf for the public because it's my job to take your message and disseminate to the public to make it so that they can understand it, that's palatable. So try to stay away from the insider terms, and a good producer, a journalist is going to guide you through that, and they're going to stop you and say, I don't know, I really don't know what you're talking about. You have to sort of dumb it down for me a little bit. So watch the numbers. We're going to see an example coming up, somebody who did very well. But if you're telling me about 17,500 people, you know, in 12 states who, you know, half the time don't smoke, but 72% do, I mean, I'm lost in the numbers. So watch it with statistics and numbers. I'm not saying don't use them. They can be used in a very powerful way. But again, if you can rehearse them or write them down, what are those 2 or 3 things that you really want to hit? I wouldn't actually use more than 2 or 3 stats or numbers in a sentence. It just, you're going to lose people. And what I've had to do, sometimes I'll work with the, you know, the subject, because what they're trying to say is really important, but we're trying to figure out how to say it so that really truly a 5th grader can understand this. Don't ramble. It makes it really hard for us to edit. But it goes back to that thing about short 10 seconds, 15 seconds bites. If you can do that, great. We're going to see an example of what happens when you ramble. So that makes it very difficult for us to edit. And if you're a rambler, we may not be calling on you again. I don't know. It depends. So let's look at an example. This is an important example because, well, I'll tell you on the back end. Let's watch a little bit. And this is of Dr. Scott, who's one of California's top leaders on Black maternal care. We did a whole show, really important subject. And here's a clip from that. And we'll talk about it on the other side.
Professor McLemore, you and Dr. Scott were principals in a recent study looking at birthing experiences during the time of COVID-19. Can you talk to us about the goals of that study and what you learned?
Quality improvement has usually not centered, as Dr. McLemore said, the lived experiences of those who carry the greatest burden of death or nearly dying. So we started with that, which for us would be Black mothers and birthing people. And we listened to them in focus groups in 2019. And from listening to their experiences around birth planning, preparation, expectation, and experience, we were able to identify these 7 theorized domains of quality of care where quality and safety were defined for, by, and with Black mothers and birthing people in dignified and equitable partnerships with Black women-led community organizations and Black women scholars. And it took that kind of, that fluidity among Black women and people who have lived experience, either as the patient or as the scholar or as the activist or as the artist, to come together to say, let's reimagine quality improvement around evaluating the services provided in the hospital during labor, birth, and postpartum. So these 7 theorized domains are safety, autonomy, communication, racism, empathy and humanity, dignity, holistic care. These all came from what Black mothers and birthing people defined as ways in which they felt violated or affirmed in the healthcare system. And in terms of feeling affirmed or really being shielded from these violations, they thought about accountability. They thought about kinship ties, what Dr. McLemore was saying around the partner and your people.
So this goes on for another 7 minutes. And so, I want to keep on our schedule, but just a couple of thoughts. One thing, this is Dr. Scott, not Dr. McLemore. So she answered a question that was directed to somebody else. So that can be an audio on Zoom, but the question was to tell me about your study. And, there was a bit of a rambling there, some jargon, and I don't know if it took a while to understand what the study was about. And it's important, but I do thought, I wonder if she could have been said a little tighter, right to the point in a concise way. This interview, interestingly enough, I have a policy really where I always pre-interview people, always. I always pre-interview people. This is the one time, I'm sorry, there's camera noise here. This is the one time I didn't do a pre-interview. Dr. Scott was unavailable. So we weren't able to go have that first call, and I could tell her the format and let her know, look, the questions have to be kind of, here's what we're going to discuss, here's the format. And it sort of backfired on me. She was just generally very busy. And so the interview didn't go probably as well. And I'm kind of curious, any thoughts on this one?
I think it's a good illustration of when you're trying to communicate something that is actually rather complicated. It's difficult to do it in the succinct sound bites.
Mm-hmm. It is. And so that's why I really wish with this, because it's such an important story, and I really wish we'd had that time to talk. If we'd had that time to talk ahead of time, and that way she would have had a little bit of prep in practicing and knowing what we were going to ask. And I'm sorry, Kate, you had your hand up.
Yeah, she explained the whole process, which is what academics would want to know. How did you do this? But we just need the findings because we don't have the qualifications to understand the process anyway.
Yes. And again, depending on who the audience is, I'm not sure they would understand all of this.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm sorry, Grace, did you have your hand up too?
Yeah, so I'm struck by the fact that from my perspective, it actually wasn't rambling. I mean, so from an interview, from what I'm used to seeing on TV, she went long. But an academic would easily have gone through, study design, questions we asked and whatever. So I guess I'm wondering if you had mentioned as a reporter, you're already thinking as a producer, you're already thinking in terms of sound bites. Was there not an option to like cut in? And like, I'm just wondering at what point, if you, the reporter, feel like the pieces are too long, do you just like cut the person off?
Yeah, well, yeah, if you have a time limit, you will. If I was doing a minute 30, this would have been very difficult to edit.
I see. Okay.
If you notice, she doesn't stop. So it was very hard, I think. And Eli, we wanted to be respectful. So he was, I think, trying to find an end, because we had other guests to get to. So this goes on for, I think this section would go on for another 7 minutes. And so, and I think actually we ended up editing it in post because it was live to tape. But you're right, for an academic, it's probably appropriate. But I would say for the average person watching it, they may tune out. They may tune out. So, and if you're trying to reach the average audience to let them know about this really important issue, you know what? The average person, they say, will give you 3 seconds, and then they click. And so that was my concern, that are people going to stick around for this? But you're right, for an academic, it might be right. So again, it goes back to that audience. So this is more for for medical community, but certainly not it's I would say for the general audience. Is on the LA Times website. But she definitely knows her stuff. And so, but again, I really wish I had done that pre-interview. It's the only time I didn't get that chance. So I blame myself for that one, because it wasn't really fair. She didn't understand our time limits, and we could have had that moment to really focus on what do we want to talk about. So that's why that pre-interview, I think, is really important. So, okay.
Professor.
Oops. Okay. Here's an example. Remember we talked about numbers, Grace? Remember we just talked about that in numbers and dense data. So this is a sample from a documentary I did on the gig economy. Rick Wertzman is an author. I think he actually may have been a former LA Times reporter. So I went to him to explain some complex issues about labor and statistics and the gig economy. I wanted to show you this very brief soundbite because I thought he presented the numbers well. You're going to see we did a little graphic to match it. So let's take a look.
It used to be in the 50s and 60s, a very small fraction of CEO compensation was based on their company's share price. Now, depending on how you measure it, it's anywhere from 50 to 80%. In turn, it makes it in their interest to try and drive up that stock price. So how do you do that in the short term? What's the quickest way to make your company's stock go up? The quickest way is to cut costs. And you begin to look at your employees, not as assets that you invest in. You look at them as costs and you cut them.
So I thought that was, and it's a very short soundbite, but I thought that he explained what could be kind of a complex issue, quite well. And so, and the interview goes on, this was a half-hour show, but I just wanted to show you as an example. Very conversational, easy to follow, and it gets right to the point. So, any questions about that? Okay, all right, let's keep going. Oh, there's Rick again. Okay, this is important. And again, many of you already may know this, but does everybody know where the voice memo app is on there? And I'm sorry, Samsung people, I know the Samsung has one as well. My husband has a Samsung, but I'm more familiar with the voice memo app. Do you all know where that is on your phone? I can't see all of you, so I hope that you do. If you don't, find it. It's terrific. And in fact, I can show you where mine is. Oh wait, I can't because it's on the screen. If I stop sharing, I could show you. The voice memo app's really important because when I was at NPR, I would have people record themselves on their end. And I still do. And so for a series I'm creating with some LA Times photographers, I've had to show them how to use the voice memo app so they could record themselves. If you could, take 5 minutes, this week and make sure you know how to work it, you know how to record yourself, you know how to send the file. That's huge. Radio reporters will love you for that. And you also want to, hold the phone generally, I don't know, about 4 or 5 inches from your mouth, slightly to the side, so you don't puff, pop your P's. And the other thing is you would want to carry that phone is like a microphone. So if you turn your head to the left, that phone goes with you. These are good tricks to know because it makes you, frankly, a little more appealing to a radio reporter. If they'd say, oh, Grace already knows this. Grace knows how to record herself. She knows she needs to go to a quiet room, maybe her closet or her office. We don't like echoey spaces. It really just helps. And that way we can say, oh, let's call Grace. She knows the drill. She's already prepped for radio. She knows how to do this. Really important too when radio reporters are on deadline. It just saves us an extra step. And I've had problems sometimes where somebody thinks they know how to do the voice memo app and they accidentally delete the interview or they don't know how to send it to me. And that can sometimes, one person, it took like 25-30 minutes, to figure out and to troubleshoot it. Meanwhile, my deadline is ticking and I need to get on the air. So that is always really helpful. If you can go today, there's one thing I would say, go learn how to work your voice memo app. And I bet many of you already know, but if you don't, it's a handy tool. So last tip I have is give them a hook. If you can give the reporter, maybe it's a timely piece of information. It's something new you discovered. It's some sort of hook to the story. I'm coming to you because you're an expert on something. You've written a book like Rick Wartzman, who wrote this whole book on the gig economy. Give me a hook. Maybe it's all the examples that you're going to give me. Maybe it's some research you've done. Maybe it's timely. But if you can find that hook, that really helps the reporter and they're going to keep coming back for more. I often find that whatever it is that you're working on, you may tell your friend, your spouse, your kid, oh, I'm working on this. You wouldn't believe what I discovered. That's usually your headline and that's your hook. It's how do you sell your work? For me, it's how do I sell my story? And so there's usually a bit of a hook. So work on that. Yeah, the reporter will really, really appreciate it. So this is fun, personal style. Again, this is much more for television, for the Zooms Andrea was talking about. I think some of these are obvious, but let's kind of go through them just in case. This is actually a photo. Again, I think I mentioned to you, we just did this interview with this woman up in Santa Barbara a couple of weeks ago. You'll notice, and this really is what the shot pretty much looked like. Beautiful background. Even if we're on Zoom, this could be a great Zoom shot. Declutter. If we see lots of mess in the background, it could be distracting. So natural lighting, this is a big tip. Find a north-facing window if you have one. It gives the best light. That's what she has right here in this shot. Look how beautiful she looks. Very soft. We didn't like this interview. She had gorgeous lighting. I have a window right here. It's not north facing, it's east facing. But this is where I do a lot of my Zooms. Always try to find a window if you can. It really provides really beautiful lighting. Think about that Fordham interview we saw at the beginning. She had really nice lighting. Obviously for radio, we want a quiet space, even on your Zoom. That's important. And so try not to have echoey rooms. You know, in radio, I've actually sometimes honestly done interviews when I've had to record myself or something. I'll go to my closet. And so get comfortable, feel at ease. And this isn't on there, but often we'll ask people in their Zoom interviews, Andre, you asked about this, try not to be against a flat wall. It's just not very attractive. So sometimes we'll have people move their furniture. We'll say, you know, if you can, please adjust your shot. And that's important. And also check your bandwidth, your how strong is your internet if you're doing those Zoom interviews. The other thing you might want to invest in is some people have ring lights. I think those can be really helpful, you know, especially if you're doing an interview at night or something, early morning, and how often you want to be doing these. How much of an investment do you want to make into it? That might be something you want to consider. This background was really quite lovely. So
regarding lighting, so using ring lights, can you talk about placement? I mean, I'm a person that I have 2 different ring lights that I have to, you know, go through this rigmarole whenever I'm going to be doing a Zoom, and you know, and now I've still got west facing windows that I can't, you know, restrict the light any more than it is already.
So that's interesting because I would want to use your west facing window as what we call a key light. So that gives you light on one side of your face. And in fact, I'm looking at your room. You have a great Zoom, a great background there, Anne. And so I really like actually the light that you have. I don't know if you have a ring light on right now.
I have 2. They're like off to the side, and then I have something reflecting off the wall behind my Zoom camera.
Well, and you know, and then I can see the reflection of your computer in your eyeglasses. And so that would be something where we would say, do you mind taking your glasses off?
Yeah, but I can't. So that, yeah,
you can't. So that's why then I would just probably have you turn down the brightness of your screen, or we would try to adjust the eye line. And so that's
of my screen, you're saying to adjust that.
Yeah, so I see your screen and your glasses. It's not the end of the world, trust me.
Okay.
But it is something that some technical directors don't like, and they go, we
Okay.
have to do something about that. But I think the key light, what you don't, here's an example right here on our screen. Here we have Phil Rucker, who's a frequent guest. Many of you probably know. He gets a star. This is great. And so his light, I can tell, is in front of him, but it's not blasting him. It looks like it might be off to the side. And he has the light on in the background, that overhead light that's highlighting those beautiful flowers. This is a win. It's decluttered. It looks great, natural light. And again, I think what I would do, play with it in, but but I would have a key light on, I think either side would be great. What you don't want to do is what we have here with Jeff Goldberg, where he has it over his head. It's shining down at him. It's not attractive. That's not good. Look how the shadows on his face. And so the other thing is, people love to do this, the big cardboard cutout of the book. Don't do that. I would recommend it. I don't want to see the big Atlantic. It's very distracting. And then he, you know, the bookshelf probably could be cleaned up a little bit. I don't think it's the end of the world, but lighting, not great. I mean, look at the difference between those two. And so, yes, so play with the placement. And what you can do, Anne, is, or anybody here, call a friend and do a Zoom, you know, reach out to me, I'll help you. and make sure to play with it ahead of time. Usually if you're working with MSNBC, one of these networks, they're going, or ours, so a Second Opinion, we're gonna call you a half hour before and do a check-in, and we test for all of that. But if you don't have that, and maybe it's not a network interview, but it's still really important, call a friend and play with that Zoom to get it right. But you definitely don't want it right over your head, and you don't want it blasting you like right here. So slightly to the side. If you have 2, that's a win-win. So some of you may know this. These are just little things. People often ask me, what do I wear? Just don't wear white. You'll notice on television, you rarely see an anchor or anybody wearing white. It's a big no-no. For gentlemen, you can wear a white shirt, but put a jacket over it. And the reason why is the white just blasts everything. It's really, the camera does not like white clothes. This is very busy. Avoid patterns. Sometimes you probably heard of zebras. Sometimes we'll have to this happened. We've had to have people go change their clothes because what happens, especially with pinstripes, mostly with men, the lines start wiggling on camera. So try to avoid pinstripes, polka dots, busy things. Now she's got stripes, those are fine. I'm talking about very thin stripes. I know this sounds crazy, and even for the men, have some powder on hand. When I was, especially with Dateline NBC and CBS, where we had big network lights, I would often have people sweating. We would carry powder. There's actually a brand called Makeup Forever that you can find at Sephora, Makeup Forever. And that is what many crews carry. Now, COVID and things, I'm not going, I think you should buy your own, but please invest in some translucent powder because often you don't want to look like you're being interviewed by Mike Wallace and you're sweating in this interview, right? And so these lights can be hot and you also just might be a little nervous. So just a little bit of a dab. I would say 1 out of 5 interviews, I have to dab people because they start to perspire. And I know that's not the look that they want, right? This is not a confrontational interview. Obviously comfortable clothing, watch the noisy jewelry. And you know what I had, this happened Saturday, I did an interview with a fellow, we had to have him take his shoes off because he kept having these squeaky shoes. And so that was a new one. Yeah, bangles, ladies and gentlemen, lots of, I'll have people take them off, especially for radio. I'll hear something, especially in radio, audio is so important. These mics will pick up everything, including your squeaky shoes. So any questions about that? Okay, great. This is an example when we talked about background and I showed Jeff Goldberg with the Big Atlantic thing. I'll tell you a story about this. Watch, this is very short, so you have to look for the interview with Julie Su, who was then Labor Commissioner for California. I think she's Deputy Labor Secretary on the federal level now. This is from that documentary I did on the gig economy. So let's take a look.
There's definitely been a trend, and it has accelerated dramatically in the last 10 years or so toward what is often referred to as contingent work.
So this is probably the only time in a 25-minute piece you'll see Julie. And so I'm going to go back and play this. And
there's definitely been a trend, and it has accelerated.
So here's a story behind this shot. Julie Su is one of the best interviewers around. Incredible speaker. When I showed up at her office, she was very amiable and very media savvy. But her handlers insisted that she be behind this giant purple billboard thing that said Department of Labor, and it had all this signage. And I said, Julie has a beautiful office down the hall with these beautiful windows, with this beautiful light. It's quiet, it's not distracting, let's do it there. And they were adamant. And it came from somebody in Sacramento. We were in downtown LA and I said, but you're not even in here. I'm telling you, this doesn't look good. And they insisted that we interview her in front of this giant purple billboard with no windows. And so I told the cameraman, my photographer, I said, I am not going to shoot this with all this signage. So go very tight on her face. And so you see, it's about as tight as it can get. And in the back, you'll see it says department, you can kind of make it out. But they wouldn't listen. And I don't think it's a very attractive shot. She's a lovely person, looks great, but it was not desirable. And so that's one of those situations where if the photographer, the producer's telling you, I really don't think this is going to look good, you may want to listen to them. And so we don't like doing interviews with lots of words and signs and billboards in the back. So, but otherwise it was a very good interview. So yeah, avoid that if you can.
There's definitely,
okay, there she is. Not sure if anybody's seen this. Let's just look at this and we'll talk on the other end, okay?
Hello, I'm Dr. Claire Pochet. I'm a general pediatrician and also a senior health advisor here at the Oregon Health Authority. I'm here with Shimi Sharif, my colleague, who's also a senior health advisor. And we thought we'd start by giving you a quick update on where we are as a state with COVID-19. As of today, there have been 38,160 cases of COVID-19 in Oregon, with 390 new cases being reported today. Sadly, we are also reporting 3 deaths today.
This goes on for another minute or so. I don't know who thought this was a good idea to dress up in a clown outfit and deliver this very sobering news. Yes, it was in October. It was Halloween or a few weeks. You know, I don't even know what she's talking about because I'm so focused on why is she wearing that outfit. So I know most of you are not going to be dressing up in clown outfits, but this is an example of what not to do, I would say. So I wanted to share that. So anyway, I noticed I'm going to race through this because I see we're running out of time. So we're quickly going to talk about frequently asked questions. And I think it was Emily who had this question, a couple of them. What if I said something wrong? And you've done an interview. Oh gosh, in the middle of the interview, you realize something didn't come out right. You know what, just tell the reporter, I want to do that. You know what, that didn't sound right. Can I please do that again? It happens all the time. And of course you can. I always let people say it again. Sometimes it doesn't come out right. If something's misquoted, if there's a problem, then you need to talk to that reporter right away for a retraction or some sort of correction. But during the interview, always say, you know what, let me try that again. It didn't come out. You have every right to do that. May I review the story before it airs? No, you may not. And that comes to that trust issue. And so you should look at the work of the reporter, feel comfortable with who this organization is. Do you trust them? But you generally no, you're never allowed to see something before it airs. And there was one other question I had there too, which is a lot of people say, can I look at the questions ahead of time? Generally, no, I don't provide questions ahead of time. I'll do talking points and say, these are the things we want to talk about. But generally, reporters are not going to submit questions ahead of time. Real quickly, getting noticed on social media, we all want to, right? So if you're not on Twitter, I know it can be a toxic place. I really would encourage it though. I find most of my experts through Twitter. I look at Google Scholar, I'll look at Google, but Twitter is probably the first place I go to. If you can spend 5 minutes a day, I mean, I sometimes spend way more than 5 minutes on Twitter, but you have to do it all the time. You can't do, oh, I'm going to do a post in October and then I'll do another one in December. You really have to be pretty active on it. Find something to tweet, look at something, live tweet a conference, you're at an event, tweet about it. And hashtag the, if you're at the American, Cancer Society and they're having a big event, tweet it, take a picture of it. Say, Christopher's giving a really great speech right now. And I gave an example there of Jason Stanley, who's very, very active on this. And he is always tweeting. If you get a chance to do an op-ed, maybe that would be an opportunity, but really if you're serious, I would encourage you to, I know Twitter can be tough, but it is where. Also, think about TikTok. There are 40 million followers for the Washington Post, 40 million on TikTok. This is a platform people ignore, and including the LA Times, and they're really putting a lot of resources to it. Even you as a professor, you don't have to be some 22-year-old influencer. This guy has 41,000 followers, this nuclear physicist. And I'm going to show you a quick example. You guys can do these at home with your cell phone. And if you're in doubt, find a young person, find a teenager to help you. Let's just take a look, okay? Where is it?
This is a really fun question. How do you shield against radioactivity? Well, it's going to depend on the kind of radiation. So if it's alpha or beta, it doesn't take a whole lot. Alpha pretty much can be stopped by a piece of paper. Beta, a piece of lucite or plastic, maybe a 1/4 inch thick, will pretty much stop just about any beta particle. If you've got photons, then you want something with a high Z or high number of protons. Now, tungsten is really good. Lead is really good. Lead has often been preferred in the past because it's got a high Z, a high number of protons.
So this is short. He's only another 15 seconds. Look how many. He has 28,000 views, 2,500 likes, 167 comments. He shot it on his cell phone in his office. Really low tech. Clearly has a big following. I say go for this. Start doing some TikToks, folks. This is a platform I think you're really going to see a lot. You're seeing a lot of growth in, and you can do these. He did it one camera. He didn't even edit anything. the thing is, he does them a lot. He does a lot of videos. So, and you can find that. That's a new medium. Optimize your bio. If you are an expert on hate speech, make sure that's in your bio. So when I go to Google and I go to the pages at Fordham University or Loyola Marymount, and I'm looking for the hate speech expert, I'm going to see that. Pitch your work, pitch it. If you got a great story, great book coming out, a big study, pitch it, but practice first. Remember that hook. Remember the reporter is only going to give you, the assignment editor, like a minute of their time. So make sure you have your pitch ready. And of course, work with your marketing. Christina Greer at Fordham is just fantastic. She's everywhere. She's so smart. She's really, really active on all these social medias platforms, and obviously really works with the marketing. I have some examples. We'll probably not have time for them, but Harvard has a great program where they have little videos of their professors. They're only 30, 40 seconds. I thought they were really well done. We'll take a look. This is what they're
I have a couple of papers and projects looking specifically at what comes next for politicians after the.
So really good. And he actually, what he put up there was really interesting. It could easily be a story. It was looking at campaign finance reform. Fordham, by the way, Fordham has a fantastic marketing video about one of their law.
We're in so many ways a problem-solving Center for Social Justice. We look for where there's a need. And so when we do get involved in an area, it's an area that has the potential of our students, our staff making a difference.
While I was a student.
Really well done. Hands off to Fordham. This is one of the better videos I've seen from a marketing department at a university. If I were in New York, I would consider doing a story on this clinic. We actually did a piece at Loyola Law School on a similar thing. Really, really well done. So yay to Fordham. And we don't have time for the mock interviews. I bet Kristen's happy about that. This is my contact information. If you have any questions, concerns, advice, or you just want to talk, this is where you can find me. I am always on Twitter. I'm not on TikTok, but I should be. It's been a pleasure talking to all of you.
Thank you so much, Karen.
We have 12.
Applause in video or in actuality. Thank you so much.
No problem.
This is just a fantastic afternoon. Do you have just a few minutes to take maybe one or two more questions?
I do. I'm happy to. I'm sorry I'm a minute over the show.
It looks as though, Emily, you had a question, right? Oh, no, okay. Kate or Matt? Do you still have your hands up?
Yeah. What advice do you have about connecting with general interest publication media? Like, I think that's hard for those of us in the religious ethics space because, the one time I got on TV, they wanted someone to talk about Biden as a Catholic, but I do economic ethics, right? Folks do environment, migration. How do we make that connection with general interest publications?
You know what I would do? I'm thinking of Deborah Netburn from the LA Times, who's our new theology reporter. I would go to Twitter and I would just put in theology reporter, religion reporter, or whatever it is, because each general interest is too wide. So if your focus is on that, what I would do is I would run it. First thing I would do is run it through Twitter, and I would try to find whoever reporter, seems to be covering your beat or publication. I would immediately start following them, and then you can tag them. You could say, "Hey, Deborah," and you really should. Deborah Netburn, if anybody's not following her on Twitter, she's an LA Times reporter. She's on a new beat, the religion beat. So follow her and tag her and say, "Hey, Deborah, I've got a new study," or I have or comment on one of her stories. Reporters love that. If she's got an article, retweet the article and then tag her and say, "I agree," or approach a general interest publication, Kate, and offer to do an op-ed. Maybe you've got a new piece coming out, a study. You have some thoughts on Biden as a Catholic. Reach out to those publications and local papers, national papers. We all want to be in the New York Times. I don't, but you may want to. But think about lesser known publications where you can get a foot in. Your local NPR station. Find out who the assignment editor is. That's a term. Hopefully you guys know that assignment editor or planning editor. They're the people that are assigning the stories in television and audio, and they're looking ahead. Find out who they are. And again, I would follow them on social media. You can also write an email, but that's what I would do. Use Twitter to your advantage. Anybody else? But yes, that is great to be doing that and pitch them. But remember, get your pitch down so you know, like in 1 or 2 sentences, what it is. You know, why does this reporter? Why should I be talking to you? So, yeah.
I see Federico's hand up.
Yeah, thank you very much. Since we were talking about a social media platform, maybe if you can say a word about LinkedIn. Is it helpful? Is a place where reporters can go?
It is. And I realized afterwards, like, oh, I should have put LinkedIn in there. Absolutely. That is a great place to be posting. I'm on LinkedIn. You know, funny enough, I actually don't spend as much time. I think I'm in the minority there. LinkedIn's a great place to post, you know, an essay you put together. Maybe you're on Substack, you know, and you've got a new publication are coming in. Absolutely LinkedIn. I find that when I am looking for an expert though, for some reason I tend to, I'll put it in Google. I'll go to Twitter and I'll go to Google, and honestly, there's sometimes LinkedIn accounts pop up. Please have a LinkedIn if you don't, because that's how I often reach experts. I reach into Twitter or LinkedIn.
One more quick one from Matt Gavde.
Yeah, it is quick, actually. I'm just curious about Zoom backgrounds, because I have a house with 3 kids at home and I don't have an office that, you know, except for my basement, which is not media friendly. So like, what's the advice on that?
You have one there right now, don't you? Is it
That is a Zoom background.
Yeah, I actually like that one. That's not bad. The other one that's kind of nice sometimes is is the blur background. If you can just find, yeah, exactly. There you go. I actually liked your book one. I think it's good. I think what you have to do, yeah, I like that one. I think that's a good one. Yeah, look, I mean, if you've got, I know people at Daily Times, somebody does it in their bed and they, you know, the pillows are everywhere and he'll just blur it sometimes. I think, look, you work with what you have, right? And if you do that one, it's great. I would just watch it because, you know, if it's, I wouldn't put the palm trees up. You know, it's great to think you're in Tahiti, but I would avoid that. I think the one you actually have right there is really good. And if that's what you work with what you have, I think it's great. I like the blur one as well. Yeah. For television, it's kind of tricky. They would probably, my TD would say, "You sure there's no place in your house?" But that one actually looks quite lovely.
Karen, thank you so much for all of your insight today. I think most of us who saw this are still going to want to watch the recording just to make sure that we got all of it. And to all of the rest of us, don't forget that there will be another opportunity for this kind of interchange and training at CTSA in the spring. So thank you very much. We'll see you all in the conference, and thanks again to Karen.
Oh, my pleasure. Best of luck.